Hi, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. As Chris Moltisanti on HBO's The Sopranos, Michael Imperioli was sensitive, hostile, violent, and even at times hilarious. His new book, The Perfume Burned His Eyes, has a lot of the same qualities. It follows a 15-year-old kid with a single mom who strikes up a friendship with Lou Reed in 1970s New York. And the man is here with us right now. Please give a round of applause for Michael Imperioli. Let's hear it.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I love Lou Reed. I love the Velvet Underground. I love 1970s New York. I love your book. It was really fun to read. It's great to be in that period of time. What made you want to write a novel? When did you start writing?
I've written screenplays and teleplays, like some of the Soprano episodes, and I was a co-writer on Spike Lee's Summer of Sam.
I didn't know
wrote
that.
And wrote a co-producer of that. I brought that to Spike with my writing partner, Victor Calicio. And that was the first thing that I had written a lot before that, but nothing very good. A lot of garbage that I threw away. That was the first thing that kind of finished and got made. And then I wrote on the 5 episodes of Sopranos, and an indie movie that I directed in 2009 called A Hungry Ghost. A lot of stuff that never got produced. But I love fiction, and I've attempted prose over the years, and nothing really happened, and finally found a way in with this story.
It's weird the way that happens as a writer, right? You want this thing, you want to try this thing, but then all of a sudden some idea clicks and you can finally do it, and it's like some sort of weird magic that you have no control over.
Yeah, it is, and for me it was finding the voice. I started writing this more in a third-person, omniscient kind of narrator, and it was too broad, and I wasn't clear on the focus, but once I found his voice and wrote it almost in the form of a journal or diary or something, it really came together for me.
How close is this character to you, Matthew?
He's not really close at all. I was a teenager and came to Manhattan from someplace not that far away, a little later in the 80s, not in the 70s, but none of the events happened to me. None of the events are really true. My personality, I would say, is a lot different than the kid. I was about 3-4 years ago, my older son was 16, which is the age of the character at the beginning of the book, and he was going through 16-year-old things, and I kind of wanted to relate to that state of mind of being 16, and started writing this character, not based on him, but just based on that age. And at the same time, Lou Reed passed away shortly after I started this. He was a friend in the last decade or so of his life, and a real big hero for longer than that. And his death hit me in a lot of different levels, and somehow the two of those things resulted in this story.
What was it like being friends with Lou Reed?
Well, I got to meet him at he had a concert at the Knitting Factory in Tribeca, the old one. And The Sopranos had just kind of hit. And so I asked my manager to get me tickets. And she went through his publicist, and we got tickets, and we saw the concert. And after the show, his publicist said, "Lou wants to meet you."
Please tell me he's a big Sopranos fan.
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't know. I didn't know he knew who I was or that I was there or anything. And then we went backstage, and he was just the best and kind and generous. And over the years, we saw each other a bunch of times, and he was really just really kind and just a great guy, And when you meet someone who's your hero for so long, it can go, a lot of different ways and a lot of disappointing ways. And the fact that he was so just generous and meant a lot to me,
Yeah. Wait, so was he a Sopranos fan?
He was, yeah, big one. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Laurie Anderson told me he did a really good impersonation of my character, which I never got to hear, but she said it was quite spot on.
You're just shouting Adriana or something?
I don't know what he did. She didn't go specifics, but she said it was pretty good, actually.
I bet there's a part of you that really wants to have heard that impression.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, definitely.
So when you started
You know, this building has a lot of rock and roll history. You know that, right? This was
the Tower Records.
And you know who lived upstairs, right?
I do.
In the
Who was
80s
it?
and 90s, Keith Richards.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, because we had his daughter here a couple months ago, and she was like, we lived upstairs.
Lived upstairs, yeah.
Yeah. So when you start writing this book and you decide to sort of tie in Lou Reed or bring Lou into it, what sort of, did you have any hesitation or what sort of fears do you have depicting someone like Lou Reed? He's such an iconic figure.
Right.
Like, how do you make him yours?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of the details of where he was, you know, just factually at that period of time are based on stuff that I learned over the years through interviews and books and stuff. Like, he did live on the Upper East Side, which I found really weird. Just one of the things that really, at the time he had a transgendered girlfriend, which is not strange considering it's Lou Reed. But the fact that he lived on the Upper East Side really intrigued me. Because
a nice building with a doorman.
He did, because most of the time he lived downtown in the Village, most of his life, I think. But there was this period where he was really strung out on amphetamine, a specific one, Digoxin, which was for like heart attack patients, and he was on that like for days and lived in this apartment. Nothing in the refrigerator, and you know, but also a very kind of an unhinged period mentally, but also a very creative period, very fertile period, and that really intrigued me. So the idea of the kid who comes from a very blue collar working class background, suddenly living in this more posh environment, alien environment, Manhattan. He goes from Queens to Manhattan, and they're in the same building, and they strike up a relationship, and Lou becomes this mentor. So some of the details are correct, but all the events are just fiction, you know.
Yeah. Did you run it by Laurie Anderson or talk to her about it?
I did, you know, after it was done, you know, and I sent her a letter about it and sent her the manuscript, and she read it and liked it, and I was really happy about that, yeah.
Did you have any fear depicting this version of Lou Reed at all, or diving into an iconic character? Because obviously, some people, no matter what you write, people are going to have some kind of like, oh, that's not Lou, or he wasn't like that, or this isn't specific. Like,
you know, I'm not afraid of that because it's not really a biography, you know, and nor is it meant to be. I mean, and a lot of the whatever kind of factual details on, like I said, where he was living or what he was doing, you know, from what's been recorded about him are pretty, you know, honest at least, or authentic on some level. But no, I didn't, because, you know, he's become, in the book, he's a character. It's not it's not meant to represent his life. He's serving a specific function in the book in terms of his influence on this boy, both as a father figure and as an artistic mentor, I think. Because on another level, the book, on a surface level, it's a coming-of-age story, but on another level, to me, it's about the passing the baton of artistic influence and things like that.
Which he was kind of doing in '76 already. Maybe not intentionally, but the punk movement in New York.
He was doing it from '66, yeah.
Was he looming? Was he already looming as a kind of iconic figure by '76?
Oh yeah, much earlier than that. You know, in the early '70s, he was the first issue of Punk magazine when the term really was coined. You know, that Legs McNeil and published was Lou Reed was on the cover. You know, so he was already, and he was older than like the Ramones and Blondie and Television, all those early bands. He had already
about like a decade on them.
Yeah, he had already been in the scene. The funny thing is, the Velvets, you know, in the mid '60s, they're touring and they're performing in the Factory with Warhol, and you know, in the center of New York social life, and they toured and they were, you know, this underground, groundbreaking band. And then when they broke up, Lou moved back to Long Island and was like living with his parents, working for his dad as like a bookkeeper for a while. And then came back to New York as a solo artist and kind of reinvented himself again. But I find that period pretty bizarre. That
living with his parents
after being in one of the influential experimental rock bands of all time.
Well, also because he wrote so often negatively about his father and about his parents. Right. He had this very mythic part of his mythic persona was that his parents had done something to him or had mistreated him, and so therefore he crafted all these songs. But in reality, there was a book that came out recently that talked about this. He actually had like a decent relationship with his family.
Right, the Anthony DeCurtis biography, right. Yeah, there's, his sister wrote a really good article that they published in New Yorker about, from her point of view on what her parents and Lou's relationship was. If anyone's interested in that, that's a really good one to look up.
Yeah.
Cool.
The song "Kill Your Sons," right? Or
Kill Your Sons and Sex with Your Parents. Listen to that one. That's an interesting one. Yeah. And a lot of other ones where he goes into that. But
you talk about how you started writing this book to sort of get into the mindset of a 15-year-old kid and the struggles of a 15-year-old kid, and then you kind of create this separate father figure for him that is, I think, maybe in some ways, and I hate to play armchair psychiatrist, and I'm really sorry if that's what it seems like I'm doing, but in some ways is sort of like a fantasy father figure for, I mean, all of us who love Lou Reed's music and love Lou Reed would love to have been a 15-year-old kid and had him kind of kicking around us. What do you think that said to you about the relationship that you were writing about your own son and what you wished you could kind of impart to him? Or was that just a jumping off point and then you were
well, that's a good question. I mean, my relationship to my father was very different because this kid, his father's not such a great guy. He's a philanderer, he's a gambler, he abandons the family, he humiliates the mother because he's having affairs that everybody finds out about, and then he leaves, goes to California and dies in a car accident. So the kid is not a very present father and supporting or loving one per se. My dad was the opposite. My dad was a bus driver in the Bronx, was the best, most present dad, really loving, really, sacrificed everything for his family. And I mean, I'm still very close, and he's the greatest. With my own son, because my oldest son has done some acting and stand-up comedy and stuff, so he has those artistic inclinations. So, and like I said, the book works on two levels, both as just this father figure, ushering a teenager into manhood in some ways and guiding him through the totems of manhood and maturity, and also the circle of artistic influence and continuity, if you will.
What's it been like to watch your son become kind of an artist on his own as well? Dive into acting a little bit and do stand-up comedy? That's
great. I mean, he did his first stand-up routine when he was 5. I think we were in Jamaica at a resort, and they had like a talent show, not for kids. It was like for like adults doing whatever stuff. It was really late at night, and somehow he had to go on last. So by the time he went on, it was like midnight.
Were they hoping that he would be asleep by the time?
Yeah. And this 5-year-old kid like this big goes up and starts doing knock-knock jokes, but. And then when he was 15, he was doing clubs in LA and performing with the adults and stuff like that, and writing his own material, which was pretty wild.
Did you impart to him essentially like if you want to be an actor, you should be a writer too? You should be writing all the time?
I didn't necessarily say that, but his writing at the same age as this kid, 16, I found to be very smart and sophisticated. And I think we've underestimated teenagers. And I think teenagers are far more sophisticated than they've been given credit for. And you need no better evidence than what's just happened in this country in the last couple of weeks. And it's just seeing them be the voice of reason and sanity and give us hope for the future, because, certainly the people in power have failed them tremendously. And so it really affected how I wrote, because I'm writing his words from his point of view, and it really gave me confidence there can be a literary bent to his writing, because, there's some sophisticated 16-year-olds out there.
I imagine, you think of something like, and this is a very cliche example, but the greatest example probably of that is Catcher in the Rye, right? Of like
Which is a very big influence on this.
yeah,
no doubt.
It's like you're writing from the perspective of this teenager, so you have the language of a teenager, some slang, but then you also have the sophistication of a smart, precocious teenager, which allows you as the author to sort of imbue your own sensibility as an adult into this person while writing as in a young person's voice.
Exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. And Catcher in the Rye and Candide were two books that really blew my mind as a teenager, and they are similar in a lot of ways because they're in some ways coming-of-age stories, and even though Catcher in the Rye, Holden is a very sardonic kind of sarcastic wit, but there's also something very pure and innocent about him.
He's broken.
And broken. And I tried to when I was in acting class, when I was like 18, I worked on a scene from Catcher in the Rye for like a couple of years, actually. The scene, he goes to see a prostitute, and me and this great actress who was in The Sopranos, Sharon Angela, worked on that scene for like a couple of years. So I have a real affinity for that book.
Sorry, hearing about acting class, I can't help but think of Chris Maltasanti going to acting class.
He did go to acting class.
What was it like doing those scenes, like being an actor, doing those acting classes scenes, acting badly, but also having to act well enough so that people could perceive him as being a good actor at times?
Oh, that's gold
many
for an
layers.
actor to play. Oh, all that stuff. I mean, to that character had so many dimensions to him, and the drug addiction and playing those physical states of mind and acting and aspirations. I mean, what I really loved about that character is he really worked hard for the things that he believed in. He wasn't just someone who just like sat back and took things as they come, and because his uncle was the boss and just waited to be handed stuff. Like, he really wanted to be a good mobster. He wanted respect, and he wanted them to have confidence in him so he could rise up the ranks, and he wanted responsibility. And he wrote screenplays. He actually sat his ass in the chair and typed, wrote him out. He didn't just say...
Huge thing.
A huge thing. Like, everyone says, my story's great, it should be a movie. If only I could write, or I should talk to a writer. He got the software, whatever. Final draft or whatever it is, but really did the work, and I found that really admirable. I mean, there's a lot about him that's not admirable, of course, but that aspect of it, I really, respected.
Yeah, you said that you wrote a number of episodes of The Sopranos. How did you get involved with writing on The Sopranos after you got the gig as an actor?
Well, after the first season, before it had aired, I had fallen in love with the show. And
it's like hands down, I think, still the greatest TV show of all time. I mean, outside of like a 22-minute show like Seinfeld or something, like it is the greatest hour-long drama. And I say this all the time when I talk about it. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's also the greatest because every episode stands alone, and none of the real like golden age shows that everybody talks about now have that. They all try to have like a big long arc over one season.
That's true.
The Sopranos is amazing because you can turn on any episode and watch one storyline
and not be lost.
Yeah, and it's just the best.
Yeah. Well, I fell in love with the characters, all the characters, not just my character, and I really, because when I first got the gig, right, we did the pilot first. I didn't really know where that was going, because I wasn't sure if because a lot of it was very funny. There wasn't anything really like it. Is this like a spoof of the mob, or? I wasn't sure where it was going to go, and kind of surprised it got picked up. Now we started shooting the first season, and the scripts kept getting better and more detailed and intricate and offbeat and darker and funnier. So by the time we wrapped the first season, I was nuts about it. So I wrote a spec script, and I sent it to David. And around the same time, Summer Sam came out in the theaters, and I invited him to the premiere.
Oh, so you had a little bit of heat.
I had some heat, and I used it, and I sent him the script, and he liked it. And actually, there was a big storyline in my spec script that we used in the episode that I wrote. It just somehow synced up to something he was planning. As he was planning, I wrote Christopher O'Dee's and has this experience of the afterlife, visions of heaven and hell or whatever. And he said, we can use that because we're going to have him get shot in season 2. So that was a whole stuff that just, was serendipitous from the spec script, was able to go into the actual episode in the first season.
I just recently watched the episode where he got shot. I think around the holidays. I was rewatching some of the show. It's a great scene. It's a great scene. He's like trying to mentor these kids, but they're just too stupid to be mentored, and then they shoot him.
Yeah, that's what happens, I guess.
You're in another show right now that's premiering. Is it premiering this week? Alex Inc.
Premiered March 28th, last night.
Last night?
Yeah.
It's Zach Braff's new show.
Yeah.
He's writing on the show, in the show. He's directing it, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about the show.
It's an ABC comedy. It's like a real traditional network sitcom about Zach Braff plays a guy who quits his job and starts this podcast company. Really takes a risk with his, family, and quits a kind of successful job and position. And he hires me, who's his cousin, who doesn't literally know what a podcast is. Like, he calls it podcast, and Zach says, you don't need the air quotes, it's actually a real thing. But he doesn't really care. He's not intimidated by the fact he doesn't know what it is, because he thinks he can sell anything anyway. And they work in this incubator kind of space with a bunch of little startups of, young hipster millennials doing these crazy, startup companies and internet companies. And my character's a lot older than them and kind of a fish out of water in that element, but not intimidated at all, and kind of actually figures he's smarter than pretty much everybody in the room, which may not be the case.
I'm sure he'll have his moments where he gets to be smarter than everybody in the room.
Yeah.
I think we have a quick clip from the show. Let's roll the clip from the show.
We got a little problem. The guy wants 3 months in advance.
I don't have $10,000 unless I dip into the 401k, which I promised Rooney I wouldn't do.
Yeah, but what if there was a world where you didn't tell Rooney?
I tell Rooney everything.
Yeah, in this world. Let's go to that other world. Look, I believe in this company. That's why I'm putting everything I have into it.
You don't have anything.
Yeah, but it's all in there.
I need an answer, fellas. I got Pilates at noon.
We're gonna be huge, Al. I know this.
We're in.
That's it.
Did you ever feel like after The Sopranos you got typecast or anything like that? Was it hard for the actors from The Sopranos afterwards?
Before and after, in some ways. You're kind
Really?
of typecast being an Italian American from New York, just what that entails in a lot of ways.
Right.
But yeah, when you do something that's on television,
And it becomes iconic almost
because
immediately.
a movie's just 2 hours, right? So a television show's, like The Sopranos is, I don't know, 80 hours or something. I don't know how many hours. So there's people have spent so much time with you as this character that, there is an element of that. But you, as an actor, you have to make the choices to, break away from that, because you're going to get cast as that. People see that. Let's say like when there's a successful bank robbery movie, they're going to see 10 bank robbery movies after that or whatever. So you have, because Hollywood sometimes thinks narrowly. So, but as an actor, you have to push yourself in other directions and make it work somehow. I think what a lot of people do when they have a really big success is they think the next thing has to be equal or better than that, which is a very, high bar for something like The Sopranos to aspire to, instead of just saying, let me just find something that I like, that's good, that's interesting, and go from there. Not just saying, now just plotting these career moves, to,
There's no way you could ever plot another
No,
having another
of course not.
Sopranos.
Of course not.
It's one of those things. I mean, the show is incredible, but it also struck at a specific time,
Right.
And that's one of the reasons for its like massive success. It would have always been like very well reviewed and I think successful, but there was a time slot that it kind of hit that made it wildly successful.
Because it was like binge television before you were able to binge on it, but it was also must-see television, meaning Sundays at 9, everyone would go, there'd be like bars would be empty because people would go home to watch The Sopranos at 9 o'clock, which that's a thing that doesn't really happen anymore unless it's like the Super Bowl or something.
Maybe Game of Thrones, but not even...
Or Game of Thrones,
I don't
yeah.
even know
But
to the level of The Sopranos.
Right,
though.
because you could still, You know, you can see it so easily right after it airs and stuff. But it's not a...
Right, Sopranos was still in the age of maybe like recording it on a VHS
Yeah.
tape for the first couple seasons,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I got the VCR set to record it tonight.
Right.
I'm okay.
So it was a bit different. The timing, I think, did have a big effect on it.
How often did you hear walking around the street, like, do people shout Adriana at you or lines from the show?
All the time. You know, and like a whole other, it seems like now a whole other generation of people have seen it and like it, you know, which is cool. You know, people who, when it was on the air, were too young. Their parents maybe wouldn't, for good reason, let them watch it at the time.
Let's get some questions from our audience. What do we have here?
Hi. So I love The Sopranos too, but I was wondering with your book, and I read that you're a member of the Jazz Foundation of America. How much of an influence music had on you growing up? Did you ever think of going into music?
Jazz. Actually, Lou Reed was a big supporter of the Jazz Foundation as well, and performed at a lot of their benefits. And that's a great charity, by the way, because what it supports, it gives money to blues, jazz musicians who are older and can't pay their rent or their heating bill, or tons who got displaced in Katrina and in Houston. It's really amazing because a lot of these people who, and a lot of them are very known and famous, like didn't really make money, you know, because of the way the deals were done and the way royalties were structured at the time they were working. So I'm glad you know about that because it's one of the best charities out there. Music was pretty big deal for me, even more as an adult, I'd say, than as a kid in a lot of ways. And still is. I'm still like a fan. Like, I went to see Morrissey and, you know, stand like in the pit with all the nuts and, you know, wait for hours and stand there with everybody else to get a good position. You know, I do that.
Well, you said that you had wanted this to look like a Smiths album, right?
That was my goal, yeah. That was my influence to, you know, look like a Smiths album, but because I love their cover art. And,
Yeah.
So that was but I wanted a teenager, and then I saw, in a magazine, I saw this photo. It's actually, there's two boys in the photo, actually, but when I first saw it, it was just this half. And we tracked down the gallery and the photographer who passed away in 2012, and wound up getting the rights to use it, which I'm really happy because I think it really
I love it.
I think it works.
Yeah. I love this photo. It reminds me of like Robert Frank's photographs.
Robert
you know,
Frank,
the
yeah.
Americans.
It's
like,
definitely in that genre,
yeah,
right?
I love this.
Joseph Sterling's a photographer.
So you're a fan of the Smiths. You're a fan of Lou Reed. Are those your top two, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Morrissey.
Morrissey. Even Morrissey solo stuff as well.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, okay. I agree. Next
Yeah.
question.
No doubt.
Who's got the mic right here?
Hi. I was wondering, would you write another novel? And if so, what, I guess, are there any different kinds of themes or genres that you would want to explore?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do want to write another novel. It won't be a coming-of-age novel because I think that kind of get that out of your system in a way. But yeah, definitely. I don't like to talk about it because it kind of feels like it's jinx. You jinx things when they're premature. But yeah, definitely.
You can talk an idea to death, and then you lose the steam.
Yeah, it's like it's taking the magic a little bit off it somehow. But I don't know.
You kind of want to keep it all in here until you're finally like at the computer.
Right.
If you let it out, there's nothing for the computer. Sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you still write screenplays as well?
Yeah. I'm developing a couple of TV projects right now. More than screenplays, more in television stuff, right? So we'll see.
One more.
Hi. Who was the other kid in this picture when you found the picture?
Who's this kid?
No. Who's the other person that was in the picture when you originally got it? Was it just some random person?
This is a photo from a book of photos called The Age of Adolescence by the photographer Joseph Sterling, and they're photos from 1959 to 1964 in Chicago. So this was in the book, it folds out. It's like 2 pages of the book, and it's 2 teenage boys on the beach.
Oh, okay.
But when I saw I was looking in New York Magazine, an article about after Dennis Johnson died, and they had this picture, just this boy. But when I saw the image, I was like, that's the cover of the book. I said, that should be the cover of my book. And I didn't know there was another boy on the other side of the photo. Actually, on the back cover of the book, you see the other boy. I don't know if we have it handy. But there's something about it because they're on the beach having fun. The other boy's really smiling. He's actually having fun laughing, but it can go either way. He also looks like he might be in pain, right, or screaming.
It looks like the perfume's burning his eyes.
It looks like the perfume's burning his eyes, but the reality is they're having fun at the beach. They're probably yelling to some girls or something and just like having a blast. But you don't really know that. It's something I just found it really hit the nail on the head for me. You know.
Michael, I love the book. Congratulations! It's out right now. People can pick it up.
It's out April 3rd.
Oh, April 3rd.
You can pre-order it now, but you can buy it wherever books are sold, including your local independent bookstore, which is very important to support.
Absolutely. Oftentimes we say go to Amazon.
You could,
I
but
say go to the Strand or go to somewhere else
Go
in the
to
city.
3 Lives or McNally Jackson or all those great bookstores in the world.
It's a
Yeah.
great spot. And Alex Inc. is on ABC now.
Wednesdays at 8:30.
Wednesdays at 8:30. Michael Imperioli, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you very much.